Good morning, dear students. In this session, we'll be seeing about juvenile diabetes mellitus or diabetes mellitus in children. So first of all, I want to introduce the topic diabetes mellitus to you. We'll see the definition of diabetes mellitus. The term diabetes mellitus describes a metabolic disorder of multiple etiologies characterized by chronic hyperglycemia with disturbances of carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism resulting from defects of insulin secretion, insulin action, or both. So, in this definition, we can see main three aspects. That is, first is it is a metabolic disorder. Second is it is characterized by chronic hyperglycemia, and there is a disturbance of carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism, and it may be due to the defects of insulin secretion, insulin action, or both. Now we are going to see about the functional anatomy and physiology of pancreas. So this is just a review for you. And functional anatomy, you all know that insulin that is produced by the beta cells in the islets of Langerhans. And now we are going to see about the functions of insulin. So before going to the topic diabetes mellitus, it is very important to understand the functions of insulin. So the insulin has very major functions in our body. The first vital function of insulin is it transports and metabolizes glucose for energy. So our body requires energy for functioning. So this insulin metabolizes glucose in order to get energy for the functioning of our body. And what happens to the excess glucose? Excess glucose is converts as glycogen and it is stored in the liver and muscle. Third function you can see, that is the insulin signals the liver to stop the release of glucose. Next we are going to see what happens to the fat metabolism. The insulin enhances the storage of dietary fat in adipose tissue. And next function, that is about the protein metabolism. Insulin accelerates the transport of amino acids into cells. And insulin inhibits the breakdown of stored glucose, protein, and fat. So if insulin is absent or insulin is deficient, then what happens? There is an increased breakdown of stored glucose, protein, and fat. Now we are going to see about the classification of diabetes mellitus. We all know that the WHO's classification of diabetes mellitus, that is insulin dependent and non-insulin dependent. But this is the old classification, and this classification was replaced in 1997. And now the classification of diabetes mellitus, it is mainly based on etiology. So according to the etiology, diabetes mellitus is classified into two, that is type 1 diabetes mellitus or typical insulin dependent and ketosis prone diabetes mellitus. Second type is type 2 diabetes mellitus, that is non-insulin dependent or non-ketosis prone diabetes mellitus. So today in this session we will be seeing about the type 1 diabetes mellitus. So the type 1 diabetes mellitus is a typical insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, and apart from that we have to understand that it is a ketosis prone diabetes mellitus. The child is very much prone to get what? Diabetic ketoacidosis. So other specific types of diabetes mellitus, that is genetic defects of beta cell functioning, that is mainly chromosome 7 or glucokinase, genetic defects in insulin action, diseases of the exocrine pancreas, endocrinopathies, drug or chemical induced infections, uncommon forms of immune mediated diabetes, other genetic syndromes sometimes associated with diabetes, gestational diabetes mellitus and neonatal diabetes mellitus. So these are the major classification of diabetes mellitus. So the main classification is type 1 diabetes mellitus and the type 2 diabetes mellitus. So in this session, we'll be seeing about the type 1 diabetes mellitus or juvenile diabetes mellitus. So that is a previous slide we have already seen. Type 1 diabetes mellitus, it is also known as typical insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, as well as it is a ketosis prone diabetes mellitus. So we'll see the definition. It is a chronic autoimmune disease involving only the beta cells with gradual loss of insulin secretion. So from the definition itself, we can understand what happens in this type 1 diabetes mellitus. So in children, it is a chronic autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease, we know that our body is misinterpreting our own cells as what? As enemy. And what happens? Our immune system starts attacking the beta cells, and due to this, there is a gradual loss of insulin secretion. And we have to keep in mind two things. That is, in type 1 diabetes mellitus, the patients have a genetic predisposition to the disease. So the child with diabetes mellitus children with diabetes mellitus have a genetic predisposition to the disease. And second thing, that is, there is an environmental factor is necessary to trigger the onset of autoimmunity. The incidence, it is highest in Northern European countries like Finland, and peak age of presentation is 5 to 7 years of age. Now we'll see the etiology of type 1 diabetes mellitus. So this etiology, these factors are very important. First factor, that is the genetic factor. This we have to keep in mind, this autoimmune condition that is resulting from what? Genetic factor. So the genetic factor, human leukocytic antigen HLA and insulin gene. And recently one more loci has been identified, that is CTLA4, that is cytotoxic T lymphocyte antigen 4. Now we'll see the environmental factors responsible for the type 1 diabetes mellitus. So the viruses like Coxsackie and other enteroviruses, congenital rubella infection, early weaning to cow's milk, and certain toxins. So now we are going to see about the pathogenesis. We can see the steps in pathogenesis of type 1 diabetes mellitus. So as I have already told you, there is a genetic predisposition. So while taking history or while doing assessment, we have to identify or we have to ask for the genetic predisposition. Next is environmental trigger. So first thing, there is a genetic factor responsible for this. Second thing, the environmental trigger. That may be like we have seen like a Coxsackie virus or rubella infection or dietary agents or toxins and stress. So what happens? Because of this genetic predisposition and environmental trigger, we can see the initiation of autoimmunity. And next phase is the pre-diabetic phase of progressive islet cell destruction. So in this pre-diabetic phase, it is not necessary that the child is showing a certain sign and symptoms. Next is clinical onset of diabetes. Okay, and we have to keep in mind that is when more than 90% of pancreas cells get destroyed. So these are the steps pathogenesis of type 1 diabetes mellitus. There is a genetic predisposition, environmental trigger is there, and with this we can see autoimmunity, and there is a beta cell destruction and type 1 diabetes. Next we will see about effects of insulin deficiency. We have already told in the first slide, that is there is an effect on carbohydrate, protein and lipid metabolism. So what happens in carbohydrate metabolism? That is hyperglycemia that results in glucoseuria, that is glucose leak in urine. Why it is happening? Because of the osmotic diuresis, that is more glucose that is excreting through urine, and since that more glucose is excreting through urine, that is we can see there is diuresis. There is an increased urine production, polyuria or nocturia, and there is loss of electrolytes in urine, and since this polyuria happens, there is dehydration, and because of this dehydration there is increased thirst, that is polydipsia. And to maintain energy balance, there is an increased food intake, that is polyphagia. So these are the important concepts in carbohydrate metabolism. Next is protein metabolism in diabetes mellitus. Like we have seen in the physiology of insulin, that is insulin inhibits the breakdown of protein. Here you can see there is loss of insulin or deficiency of insulin leads to the increased protein breakdown and decreased synthesis of protein. So we can see the muscle wasting. Next is lipid metabolism, and insulin has a function, that is insulin decreases the breakdown of what? Yes, breakdown of lipids. But if there is any deficiency of insulin, that leads to the increased breakdown of lipid, and there is loss of adipose tissue. And what happens? The unsuppressed lipolysis, or there is an increased breakdown of fat for energy, that leads to the excessive free fatty acid production and increased acetyl CoA, and it leads to the elevated plasma and urine ketones and diabetic ketoacidosis. Next we are going to see the clinical features of type 1 diabetes mellitus. That is, first of all we'll see about the hyperglycemia. So the clinical features you will be knowing, that is polyuria. That is polyuria, that is 3 polys are there. Polyuria, that is increased urination. Why this increased urination? We have discussed in the earlier slides, that is increased, normally glucose will not excrete through urine. Increased blood sugar level leads to the increased secretion of glucose through the urine, and in order to secrete more, or in order to remove more glucose from the body, there is osmotic diuresis and more increased urination. Next is polydipsia. In order to compensate this polyuria or increased urination, there is dehydration, and the body will tend to drink more water, that is polydipsia. Next is polyphagia. In the first slide we have seen, that is it is a function of insulin, that is we get energy, more energy from the breakdown of glucose. But in this case what happens? In order to get more energy, or in order to compensate this energy requirement, body tends to have more food, or that is more hunger, polyphagia. Next is nocturia, and this is an important clinical feature especially in children. Next is weight loss and weakness. and the child is not interested in play, or the child is having more appetite, especially more bedwetting and all. Next is clinical features, especially in ketosis. That is, and the child complains of abdominal discomfort, nausea, vomiting, progressive and rapid deterioration. It is very important to assess the clinical features of ketosis, because type 1 diabetes mellitus is very much associated to diabetic ketoacidosis. So anytime the child can go to diabetic ketoacidosis. So while giving health education to the parents, we are while doing nursing assessment, we'll be careful about this clinical features of ketosis. Next is diabetic ketoacidosis, moderate to severe dehydration, acidotic breathing, fruity odor of the breath, shock or death if left untreated. So it is a very serious condition, that is diabetic ketoacidosis. We should be very careful, that is the child should strictly follow the insulin regimen. Otherwise the child can go to dehydration or acidotic breathing. Why this acidotic breathing happens? That is because the increased breakdown of lipids in our body, that leads to the production of ketones, and the child, if the ketones level increases in the body, normally we know that the child goes to the metabolic acidosis. So with this acidotic presence of presence of acetone, that leads to the acidotic or fruity odor of the breath. Okay. Next is we'll be seeing about the this is the honeymoon period. That is, there is a beta cell reserve optimal function and initiation of insulin therapy that leads to normal blood glucose level without exogenous insulin. So this is observed in 50 to 60% of newly diagnosed patient, and it can last up to 1 year, but it always ends. This is the honeymoon period. Now we'll see the diagnosis criteria. Plasma sugar normal is, that is fasting, is less than 110 mg percentage. 2 hour postprandial, that is less than 140 mg percentage. In diabetes mellitus, it is equal or more than 126 mg percentage. 2 hour post glucose is equal to or more than 200 mg percentage. Or we have to keep in mind any random blood sugar equal, it is more than 200 mg percentage with the classic symptoms. It's according to the American Diabetes Association criteria, diabetes care. So the other investigation, baseline HbA1c. This investigation helps to understand the duration of hypoglycemia, to evaluate treatment efficacy over time, autoantibodies to beta cell, other autoantibodies like celiac disease or thyroid disease, TSH and TFT. Next, we are going to see about the management. We need a multidisciplinary team. That is a pediatrician, pediatric endocrinologist, diabetes nurse educator, there is a dietitian, social worker and psychologist. So the goals of management, first is adequate glycemic control while avoiding hypoglycemia. Next is permit normal growth and development with minimal effect on lifestyle. And the third important goal, that is prevent ketoacidosis. This is very important goal in the management of diabetes mellitus in children, that is we have to prevent ketoacidosis. The principles of management, that is the insulin therapy. Since this type 1 diabetes mellitus is a typical insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, insulin therapy is a cornerstone of management. Next is a balanced diet. Third is regular exercise. Many parents have so much confusion about this exercise. Then there is regular monitoring. This is very important aspect of education. Next is education. So the insulin therapy This is the forms the cornerstone of management of type 1 diabetes mellitus. Initiation of zero point 0.7 unit per kg per day for pre-pubertal children and 1.5 units 1 to 1.5 units per kg per day during puberty. The commonly used insulins: short-acting, regular insulin, intermediate-acting NPH or neutral protamine, Hagedorn, Lente, long-acting, ultra-lente, premixed. Okay, and that is not recommended in children. So we have short-acting, intermediate-acting and long-acting insulin. Insulin analogs, that is short-acting, Lispro, this we all know about this, and long-acting, that is Glargine. So Lispro and Glargine. We'll see the insulin regime. Commonly we use split mix regimen and basal or basal bolus regime. We'll see about the split mix regime. Here we will give a combination of an intermediate acting with a short acting insulin that is given twice a day. So that is Lispro. It is preferred in toddlers. Next regime is basal bolus regime. That is using single dose Glargine in the evening with twice or thrice a day short acting insulin. And this Glargine that is useful in children with the risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia. That is hypoglycemia especially in the night. Next, what all nursing management or like what all nursing aspects of management in insulin therapy. That is a proper storage of insulin, and will be confirm about the strength of insulin and the syringe using, and there is a correct sequence of insulin in the syringe, that is a regular insulin followed by intermediate acting, and to bring it to the room temperature, roll syringe gently to warm insulin, and the correct technique of administration, that is 45 degrees subcutaneously and regular rotation of the sites. So this we have to keep in mind. And the insulin injection sites in children, that is subcutaneous insulin injection sites, the abdominal insulin injection sites from this diagram we can understand there is an outer arm site we can use, and outer arm, abdomen we can use, hip area we can use, and thighs we can use. And it is best considered as the abdominal injection sites, followed by outer arm, followed by thigh, and then buttocks. So it is very important we should rotate the sites. An American Diabetes Association ADA states that child can start taking responsibility for insulin administration at around 10 to 12 years of age, but that this responsibility should be given gradually and according to the growth and development of the child. Okay. So this is our responsibility to teach the child of self-administration of insulin. Next point is about the nutritional aspects. This is very important of maintaining a proper nutritional status of the child and to maintain ideal body weight and promote growth. And it is recommended that 3 main meals and 3 mid-meal snacks. 3 main meals and 3 mid-meal snacks. So what we have to do, we have to split up the calories of entire day into carbohydrates 50 to 65%, proteins 10 to 20%, fats 25 to 30%. And foods rich in fiber, that is whole pulses, whole grain cereal, vegetable and fruit should be encouraged. Food with low glycemic index should be encouraged. Foods rich in fat, especially saturated fat, should be avoided. Next is about the exercise. That is very, very important. Children should be encouraged to participate in all games and sports activities because it stimulates glucose uptake into skeletal muscle, and it plays a very important role in the management of diabetes. And risk of hypoglycemia with vigorous exercise for a long time. Add on an extra carb exchange before and after exercise, reduction of insulin dose by 10 to 15% on that particular day. Next is monitoring. So we have to educate the parents on the home-based monitoring. Home-based, that is home blood glucose monitoring, HBGM. And we know that child has to maintain recording, or child has to maintain a diary about this home blood glucose monitoring. Ideally, 4 times a day or more than 4 times a day. Midnight and 3 a.m. monitoring for nocturnal hypoglycemia. This is very important. So according to this monitoring, the physician regulates the dosage of insulin. So as a nurse, we have to properly educate the parent, that is how important the home blood glucose monitoring. Okay. Next is during follow-up, growth and pubertal assessment is important. Glycosylated hemoglobin level we have to monitor, and BP of the child we have to monitor, and especially the injection sites. And we have to screen the child for any complications. We'll see the complication. To educate the child and caregivers about diabetes, insulin, life-saving skills, recognition of hypoglycemia and diabetic ketoacidosis, meal plan and sick day management. The acute complications, that is diabetic ketoacidosis, hypoglycemia and impact on growth and puberty. Chronic complications, nephropathy, retinopathy, neuropathy and limited joint mobility. Next, we are going to see about the diabetic ketoacidosis. This is very, very important while taking care of juvenile diabetes mellitus. DKA in children is defined as hyperglycemia more than 200 to 300 mg per dl in the presence of metabolic acidosis. Blood pH is less than 7.3 with serum bicarbonate level and ketonemia, that is presence of ketones in blood. So why this is happening? That is our body utilizes or fat stores for energy. So because of that, because of the increased breakdown of fat, there is the production of ketones in the body, and increased ketones in the blood, that leads to the ketonemia. Okay. So what happens? The clinical manifestation, that is polyuria, polydipsia, weight loss, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, headache, restlessness, irritability, lethargy, altered sensorium, loss of consciousness or fever. Fruity odor in breath. Why this fruity odor in breath? That is because of the presence of acetone, tachycardia, low volume pulses, hypotension, impaired skin turgor, delayed capillary refilling time, and next is Kussmaul respiration, that is deep sighing respiration. That is in order to exhale carbon dioxide from the body is taking this compensatory mechanism, that is the more deep and shallow breathing, that is Kussmaul breath. Management of diabetic ketoacidosis, that is resuscitation, airway plus NG tube. Then we have to manage the circulation, that is 10 to 20 ml per kg of 0.9% of NS over 30 to 60 minutes, and repeat if necessary. Next is very important, that is IV therapy. Calculate fluid requirement, correct maintenance plus deficit. Correct over 24 hours with 0.9 normal saline for first 8 to 12 hours, followed by 0.45% of normal saline. Start insulin infusion 0.1 unit per kg per hour. ECG for hypo or hyperkalemic changes. Then start with subcutaneous insulin 0.25 units per kg 3 to 4 hourly. So managing this diabetic ketoacidosis is very important, otherwise it leads to some medical emergencies. So we are going to see about the nursing diagnosis. So this nursing diagnosis is based on Nanda 2018-20 risk for unstable blood glucose level. So here we are assisting the child for insulin management with the insulin therapy. Next is imbalanced nutrition less than body requirement, risk for deficient fluid volume. So here we have to monitor the fluid intake of the child, maintain IO charting, and we have to assess for any tachycardia or any vomiting or any diabetic ketoacidosis. Deficient knowledge related to the disease condition, deficient devotional activity related to illness, risk for delayed development related to complications. Nursing interventions, proper assessment of clinical manifestation, lab values, proper administration of insulin, dosage, rotation of site, plan and provide low glycemic nutritious diet, provide education about exercise, insulin administration, self-insulin administration, home monitoring of blood glucose and complications. So hope you all understood about this topic. So in this topic we have mainly discussed about the general classification of diabetes mellitus and the definition of type 1 diabetes mellitus, etiological factors, then we have seen the clinical features of a type 1 diabetes mellitus and major consequences in the protein, carbohydrate and fat metabolism, clinical manifestations, lab investigations we have seen, and we have seen the management and nursing management. So hope you all understood this topic. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.